This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Kathryn and I are talking about NaNoWriMo and more generally pushing hard for big word counts. So,
yes. Challenges.
Ooh, all right, bring it on. We're ready. I got my pencil. Let's go.
That's right. Let's go.
Yeah. So have you done NaNoWriMo, Kathryn?
I have. Yeah, many, many times. I feel like I logged into the Nano site I'm not doing Nano this year because life, but I logged into the site because I have a friend who's doing it and I wanted to buddy her so I could see how her word count was going. And I looked and it said I'd been doing NaNoWriMo since 2010, but I know that I've been doing it before that because they had a website update. And I think it was my freshman year in college. So it would have been 2007. Now I'm dating myself. Everyone can figure out how old I am.
You're young. It's all good.
I know, right? But so 2007, I was introduced to it, and a whole group of us in our dorm did Nano as a kind of a collective effort. So we would all meet in different people's dorm rooms and we'd pound out word counts. And it was like a really fun community thing. And then I did it for a couple of years after that. And then it sort of like slid off my radar, mostly because I was already writing so much that I didn't feel like I needed to have a 50,000 push. But like when you're in college and you're like, oh, I just need that creative outlet. It was like a fun activity thing for me to do. And I met people and a writing community developed around it. And that was kind of what I really appreciated about the Nano experience. But yeah, so I've done it a couple times. Finished in air quotes a couple of books. I don't think I ever stuck to the 50,000 word limit. I think I either achieved the 50,000 words by finishing the book or I didn't achieve the 50,000 words and didn't finish a book, if that makes sense. And by finish a book, I mean write the first draft from the beginning to the end. So I have like 2 or 3 manuscripts that came from winning, quote unquote, Nano that I've never really gone back and looked at.
Okay. Interesting.
But they were definitely more than 50,000 words as well. So
yeah. So is the goal to get 50,000 words or is the goal to get a complete first draft that's 50,000 or more?
Yes. So technically speaking, the goal is 50,000 words and they push everything towards 50,000 words. So it's like, get your 1,667 words in every single day and get to that 50,000 word count, right? But the ultimate goal of Nano is to get people to finish a manuscript, and 50,000 is a nice kind of like short novel, I mean, even medium length, depending on your genre, right? I guess probably short novel.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking novella, like it's kind of that tipping point between novella and novel, isn't it?
Yeah. And then they go from there, if you continue with their emails and their programs follows into revision and stuff in December and January, and they try to push toward, now you've finished a manuscript, now what do you do with it? So, yes, 50,000 words is the goal, right? But finishing the manuscript is ultimately what they're kind of hoping people do and push for during NaNoWriMo. So yeah, it's kind of a fun, like I said, community effort thing going on.
Yeah. So, all right. I definitely want to talk about the community side. I think that's a huge positive. But what about the word count? Trying to write 50,000 words in a single month. And November always feels busy and way too fast for me, I think, because like Halloween kind of launches the holidays as much as I wish
100%.
It didn't. It's really, And my kid has a November birthday and I have a December birthday, and so does my father. And so I always feel like from Halloween through New Year's is intense. Like, and the last thing I want to do is join some kind of competition to crank out word count.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like there are kind of two groups of writers with the word count thing in NaNoWriMo. A group that really struggles with getting and maintaining that word count per day. And then the group who's done with 50,000 by like day 10. And they're just like flying through, And I think it also depends on a little bit of life, things. There's a lot of young people who will, hit the 50,000 mark by the 10th of November because they're, like I said, in college, like when I was doing it, or, just out of high school or just out of college and, have a little more time in their life to dedicate to just, I'm going to sit down and write every single night. And again, that kind of community aspect pushes that. But then there's the people who do like I would now, miss 3 or 4 days, and all of a sudden you can't catch up because you don't have the hours. So I think it's interesting to kind of see that juxtaposition with the Nano people. And if you can find a time to sit down and do a consistent writing habit, then Nano's a breeze, because you just have to get those, however many. I know it's going to take me 2 hours to get 2,000 words. I'm going to sit down every day and get 2,000 words. Then you're going to get through it. Or I know it's going to take me 4 hours, or, if you're a slow writer, it will take you longer. But if you can dedicate the time, then great. Right. But if you can't, then Nano's going to feel like a giant slap in the face because you get 3 days behind and all of a sudden you have to catch up 6,000, 7,000 words before you can even do today's word count, and it starts piling up. So that's where I usually maybe I'll do great for the first week, and then I'm like, and I'm done with Nano this year.
So you quit once it becomes impossible to make the 50,000, or do you try to keep going just to get through the month and get as many words as you can?
So here's, I think, the difference between somebody who's doing National Novel Writing Month and somebody who's a writer, right?
Ooh, bring it on.
Because there's I'm doing the writing challenge of NaNoWriMo, and then there's I really want to do the writing challenge of NaNoWriMo, but regardless, I'm going to keep writing. Right. So I'm never going to say, oh, I gave up on my book, or I didn't keep writing it, but I maybe have released myself from I must get 50,000 words this month feeling that I get from signing up for something like NaNoWriMo or a writing challenge in general.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people sign up for NaNoWriMo because it is a novelty, because it's a challenge, because it's, oh, I think I have a book in me and wouldn't it be fun to see what I can do, and here is a way. It's like signing up for a run, a 5K or a marathon, whatever your thing is, 6 months from now, because then it's going to make you train. It's like, okay, if I sign up for NaNoWriMo, I'm going to make myself write. But then
they do a really good job of giving you Preptober and teaching you how to outline a novel in the month beforehand. So you're showing up and prepared and stuff. So yeah, it's very much akin to that, signing up for the 5K and saying, okay, I'm just going to do it regardless of what happens. So yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And, I've never done it because pushing to a word count doesn't feel like fun to me. That isn't my style of writing. If I can get myself to write every day, then it's not about the word count. It's about the consistency. And some days that might be heavy on research, and other days it might be heavy on word count. And another day I might be working on revision or really trying to capture the mood of a new setting that's coming into play in my story. And so I wouldn't have that freedom to sort of shift between modes of writing if I were really pushing for a word count.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there are some people who kind of have begun to structure their writing habits based on some of the Nano stuff, because they don't just do November. They also have Camp Nano in April and Camp Nano in July, where you can, again, set these big word count goals and have a community around you. And so I think I've seen within the community people who literally just plan a novel in October, write it in November, edit it in December and January, start planning for their April, not write it in April, and do that cyclical thing because they have to fit it for themselves, they like that community and the challenge aspect of the word count in order to get their first draft out. But I don't think that works for every writer, and it certainly doesn't work for me.
Right. Well, and what you were saying about college makes a lot of sense to me. And certainly there are people who order their lives around these things successfully. But, when you're young and you have fewer responsibilities, you don't need as much of a support system, or you don't need as many people to excuse you to go do this thing that you want to do, but if your ordinary life is established in such a way that you've got routines with family members and various habits, it can be really challenging to disrupt those patterns, A, for yourself to shift gears and be there, and then B, for everybody else who's expecting you to do certain things in certain ways at certain times. And so, it's like, boy, you want to throw a wrench in the works, just have a kid. Just right. Or two. Yeah. I mean,
no, I know. Yeah, exactly. Like if I was pushing for a word count this month, my kids would suffer for it because I wouldn't be able to do the things that I normally do with them in order to find those hours, or my sleep would suffer for it, or my husband would suffer for it. Somebody would suffer. There would be suffering.
Yes. Or you wouldn't work out. You wouldn't.
I wouldn't, cook dinner. I wouldn't, something would have to fall by the wayside in order to get me the hours to manage that sort of a word count. Whereas like building that interstitial writing habit that I've started being able to accomplish now that the older one is in preschool, it's like having 15 minutes here, 20 minutes here that I'm dedicating to it and feeling good about. I wrote a couple of paragraphs, or I brainstormed this thing, or I figured out the next plot point, or, whatever. Having that document on my computer that's starting to fill up with the ideas and the outlines, and it's like, that feels so good that I would hate to like train wreck that by saying, and now I'm going to do 50,000 words in a month. And if I don't, I feel like a terrible writer who can't get things done.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. When I was in my MFA program, one of my professors had us write 10 pages each week. So every week we had to show up with 10 new manuscript pages in our binder, and we had an accountability partner in class who had to check and like see, yes, these are new pages and you're advancing your story, and then sign off on the sheet. And that was part of our grade. And 10 pages, manuscript pages, is only about 2,500 words. But as my professor said, well, at the end of 13 weeks, at the end of the semester, you've got 130 pages. Well, that's half of a novel, right? You can feel really good about that. So even if you aren't able to crank out 50,000 words in a month, if you can get 5 pages out in a week or 10 pages out in a week, it does add up.
Right. And there is a benefit to having a challenge, right? And to challenging yourself and to kind of like setting a visible outward goal. And I think that's something that Nano really excels at, is you can tell people, I'm doing NaNoWriMo, I'm aiming for this, and they can kind of have something to cheer you on for. Because I think as a writer, you kind of like disappear in your closet. People don't know what you do sometimes. And you're like, oh, I managed to hit, 1,500 words today. And they're like, yay.
Oh.
It's like, is that a good thing, a bad thing? Like, they don't know. But if you say, like, this is what I'm planning on doing, then all of a sudden, like my husband could say, did you hit 1,600 words? Did you hit 1,700 words? Did you get your word count today? And I can say, yes, I did. And he can say, awesome, great job. And he has something to keep me accountable for, kind of like your pages. It doesn't have to be NaNoWriMo, but it could be something that you can physically say, like, hey, every week I'm going to have 5 new pages. And then they can say, oh, well, I can see 5 pages, right? They understand that as a benchmark, which I think is something that if you are in that way motivated where you need the challenge or you need the tactile goal of a word count or a page count, like that can be really beneficial.
Yeah, it definitely can. Right now I'm drafting longhand, but a previous couple of books, I drafted on the computer in Scrivener, and I set the word count goal for each chapter in Scrivener. And I loved watching that bar turn green. It would go like red, orange, yellow, chartreuse. Oh, look, it's green.
I did it. I accomplished the goal, right? It is important. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. Although I find too that if I use that kind of feedback loop for too long, it can become stale, and then it's like, oh, who cares, right? It starts feeling artificial.
Which is maybe why I think NaNoWriMo's a month. Right.
Right. Yes. And you've got the community and the website and,
Yeah. And that community, I think, is a game changer. And if you're talking about trying to find a local writing community, even if you're not going to try and write 50,000 words in a month, if you want to find people who write in your community, join NaNoWriMo, because they have regional groups everywhere and they are doing things, whether that's all online this year, it might be, I don't know. But most of them have like chat rooms and, things that are set up all the time. So people are sprinting together and you get to know people and you get to find out that there are other people, in your local community that maybe share the same passion as you do and can become really good. So there's that benefit as well.
Yeah. Have you found live community through the NaNoWriMo process?
When I was doing it for real, I did. And this is even back when I first was married. I was in a new area and I didn't know anyone. And so I joined NaNoWriMo and they were doing like coffee shop meetups and stuff. And I like met 2 or 3 people that I genuinely like enjoyed hanging out with. And even though we weren't like instant friends or anything, it was like, okay, I have people in this community that like I can recognize myself within, right? And so that was very beneficial for me. Here in my own local area, I haven't really dug in, mostly because as soon as I moved back here, because this is where I grew up, I just haven't had the time or the capacity for Nano in a like really communal way. They usually have meetups and I would say, oh, like maybe I could make that. Oh no, that's during my work or that's during that. Or, so as soon as your day starts filling up, it's a little harder, but it's not that it's not there. Right. And I know that it is there. So if I really wanted to try,
right,
I could. And again, that's something where you have to go outside of yourself. And if you're a little bit more of a writer introvert, the finger,
yes,
then it's a little harder to do, but it offers you a really safe way to do that, right? Like there are other writers. It also tends to skew a little younger. So there's a lot more early 20-somethings, which I am not any longer, but that doesn't mean you can't find your people, whatever age group. So yeah, right. It's just a fun tool to do that if you wanted to invest your time.
Yeah. So do people, going through the NaNoWriMo channels tend to select into little genre pods, or is it like all nano people together?
I mean, you self-define, right? But I have never really seen people like become little like unit, like cliques of genres, if that makes sense. Usually it's more like regions. So you just end up talking with the people within your region rather than separating down into genres, because the regions are set up as such that they're pretty narrow. So you're never going to have more than, maybe in the larger regions, a couple hundred to, high hundreds, but it's not, they tend to get them pretty small. So you're really talking to a small community, if that makes sense. So it almost doesn't feel like you need to say, oh, I'm only going to talk to the fantasy writers because I'm a fantasy writer. Like they're the only ones that understand. We're just all writers.
Nobody understands the sci-fi, but the sci-fi people, right?
We can say that because Robert's not here.
Yes, Robert, we love you.
But you're weird.
She said it. Oh, goodness. So it can push you to great word counts and motivate you and develop community. What are the drawbacks to NaNoWriMo?
Ooh. I think the only drawbacks are personal ones. So if you don't function well in that sort of a challenge environment, or if it gets you into that, like I call it the death spiral, like, oh, I can't accomplish that word count, so therefore I'm not a writer, so therefore I can't finish my book, so therefore I can't accomplish the word count, which means that I can't, and that happens to me, so I know it happens to other people. But I think that's kind of the only like major drawback, because I think the community is really good. They do a great job of trying to prepare people to write. They try and make it a really fun and engaging environment. They try to focus on get the novel done and then focus on revision in the next coming months. And they don't just leave you hanging, which I think is something that could have been a really big drawback. And I think maybe was 15 years ago before they really had the emphasis on this is a larger thing than just 1 month.
Right.
Because they've added so much to kind of turn it into more of a writing. It's almost like a writing workshop, in a way, because you get to see all of the steps of the process. But I think it's really more about you as the person and whether or not that's a good framework for you as a writer, or whether it is going to be detrimental for your mental ability to continue to write.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons it's not appealing to me is because I would find the social piece of it to be a chore. It would feel obligatory. And like, it's one of those things where you get out of it what you put into it.
100%.
And that's not the kind of personality I have. I don't thrive in those types of situations. And so for me, that would actually detract from doing the writing and getting the word count out and feeling productive and excited and successful about the month I'm having. I would rather just hit 50,000 words and then have a glass of wine to celebrate or something at the end of the month than be like emoji pom-poms all over a website. And that's a drawback for me personally. I know other people absolutely thrive and build community and connect that way.
Well, and I will say that I love, even outside of the community, if I had more time and space for it, I love having the days where I say, well, I'm going to hit 5,000 or 10,000 words today. And I spend 10 hours just cranking and I love it. There's something inside of me that just loves that challenge and hitting that goal and really feeling like, boom, like I've done it. Like that's awesome. Or 50,000 words in a month, being able to say, I hit that and I did it, but I would want to do that, every month, or, if that's going to be my goal, that would be my goal. Right. But yeah, so there is something to be said for having that benchmark. And if you can hit it, it's just that that's the problem for me right now. So, and having a smaller benchmark where you say, oh, I would love to write 10,000 words this month makes me feel like well,
that's totally valid though. And that is a good goal, because our lives do ebb and flow and you have to account for things like 2 little children. Taking up your time. Yeah.
And that's the thing is, I think that's where you can get into kind of a toxic mindset about it, is if you are used to, like I was 3 years ago, hitting a certain word count and then you can't anymore. Like word count can become a very detrimental thing. So that's where I try not to focus on the word count anymore, but more on what I'm accomplishing story-wise.
Right. And just consistency of process and consistency of visiting your story, staying in touch with it all the time.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So would you recommend NaNoWriMo to all of our listeners? You're like, get it.
I think I would recommend you check it out and you think about whether or not it would be a good thing for you. And hey, I know it started on the 1st of November, but you're only a couple days in. So if you want to do it, you can still go sign up and meet your community and try for that 50,000 this month.
Excellent. There you go. NaNoWriMo, have at it. Good luck. push those words out.
That's right. Go, go, go.
Yeah, you can do it. Wait, pom-pom emojis. Woo! Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.
That right there, that should be your screenshot still for the newsletter.
Okay.